and welcome to episode 20 of the Tai Chi Notebook podcast. I'm Graham Barlow, and in this episode I'm interviewing my old friend Matt Hill. Matt has a long history in martial arts, starting with Aikido, training under Morihiro Saito Sensei in Japan in the early 90s. From there he joined the Parachute Regiment, leaving as a captain in 2003. After this he started training in Systema under Vladimir Vasiliev, and now owns and runs the Systema Academy in Wiltshire, England. And that's where we recorded this podcast. Matt was kind enough to give me a one-to-one in Systema before we recorded, where we focused on the 4 pillars of Systema: breathing, relaxation, posture and movement. Matt also teaches Bushcraft and runs a yearly jungle retreat where he takes a team of people trekking through the jungle. His next destination is Northern India, and we talk about that as well. So here he is. So, Matt Hill, hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. Very good. Great to see you after so long.
Yes, we were just talking about this. It's been about 3 years. It's pre-pandemic we last got together, wasn't it?
It was. It was. I think, 3 years, as we were saying, maybe even touching 4.
Wow. And a lot changed over those pandemic years, didn't they? You actually, your academy went online, didn't it?
So I remember the week, it must have been February, was it February or March? I can't remember. February, I think, when it was, I remember vividly teaching a class here, and there were only about 3 or 4 people. Yeah. And I went back to Sarah and I said, this isn't looking good, actually. And if we lock down, because it's my income for the family, I'm professional in it. So it could have had very big consequences, and there was no idea that there was going to be furlough payment or, grants and things, which, Britain was amazing. I spoke to Vladimir and Valerie last week. They got nothing like that in Canada. They didn't get any payments from the government.
Oh my goodness.
No furlough payments. The people were on their own.
Yeah.
So we were really lucky, but I didn't know that at that stage, and I went back to Sarah. I said, I need to do something here. And I'd heard about, one person had asked me to join a Zoom call. So I heard about this thing called Zoom.
We all know online, Zoom now, don't we?
Yeah. I got online and looked into it, and then from the next morning, I figured out that night, and I put out an email to all the club members and said, look, okay, if it locks down, it'll continue, because luckily in Systema there's a lot you can do solo. Yeah. In terms of a little bit like what we did this morning, and lots of variations on that. And so I said the classes will continue, and being able to continue to breathe, move, stay healthy, keep your immune system, high, and engaging with other people will be a good thing during this period. And, all the kind of honest but, reasons to keep going that I could think of. And, hope you join me on the journey. And most of my academy stayed with it. And also I got a lot of other people, because I was kind of one of the first movers. There's not many professional Systema people in the world anyway. No. But I was one of the first movers in terms of going online. And so I picked up a lot of people from around the world as well. So in some ways, my academy actually grew. I didn't do events and things, but the membership of it grew during the period. I charged much less for online membership than I do for in-person, but yeah. Yeah, and especially if you're teaching in English, your worldwide market is huge, isn't it? Yeah. I remember in the early days I had people, it was a global class. There were people from America and Australia and New Zealand, Japan. Great. It was great. Yeah. Yeah, except it's the middle of the night for them, but Yeah. But I had mid-morning classes and kind of early evening and evening classes, so there was quite a spread of stuff that people could link into. So yeah, that's nice. Yeah. We've just done some Systema, which I really enjoyed. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. It was great to share it. It's great to be taught by a professional. It's such a professional approach to things, and because obviously I mainly do jiu-jitsu these days. I still practice my Tai Chi forms and things like that. Yeah. But striking has receded into the distance for me. So it was really nice to focus a bit on relaxing, moving and striking sort of combined together. And we were just commenting on how out of nowhere the Systema strikes seemed to come. It was really nice to get hit again, actually. I haven't been hit for ages, and I kind of missed it. But it was also, it's surprising, because you're just standing in front of me and then bang. There's no wind up. There's no like, hey, I can do a martial arts stance and punch you. It just kind of comes out of your movement. I thought that was brilliant.
How does that apply to Systema as a whole?
So the idea of that, Vlad's got a saying that you should be able to hit someone and stay human. You shouldn't have to turn into some kind of aggressive berserker to be able to have to hit someone, even in defence. So the idea where the power comes from in Systema, that it comes from relaxation. Doesn't mean it's not, you don't hit someone hard, but you hit with relaxation, not emotion and muscle. It doesn't come from anger or aggression, but also that from that, as soon as I put tension in, you see the strike coming, because you prepare with your muscles, and so the surprise that comes with it adds to the shock factor. I think that where did that power come from? Because there was no build up, there was no.
Yeah, I'm not triggered in the same way. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not almost ready for it.
Yeah.
Psychologically, it catches me off balance mentally.
Yes, and also it's quite therapeutic, because it's like, in some ways,
yeah,
it's like a massage,
and
and it releases tension from you.
I did like when you hit me with the harder one, I did almost laugh, but it was almost like the laugh was a release of something inside me, not because I was laughing at you.
Yeah,
it's because I didn't expect it, and so the body's response was to kind of let out a bit of tension, which came out almost as a laugh, which was quite interesting. Sort of natural reactions to things.
Yeah. So it comes from natural movement. So it's harder to see. You see clips of saying invisible Systema and things like that, which can be a bit misleading. The invisible bit is not noticed so much. They're not shapes and movements that you generally notice and see as martial even. Which, as we were talking earlier, the idea of where it came from. For a soldier is that the last thing they want to do, whether they're doing operations in a city or a town where there's people around, or whether you're on a battlefield, the last thing a soldier wants to do is stand out and be seen. So the kind of that idea runs through the whole of Systema, and that the natural movement, ideally, I guess, is normal movement. So nothing out of extraordinary about it, nothing eye-catching or attention-catching. But also then that comes from internal, like your emotions. If I so a normal, healthy person, or that's clean, isn't kind of their responses, their actions, their interactions aren't driven by, ideally, anger or frustration or stress or pride or ego or greed. If you can be clean, I know these are kind of quite lofty ideals, but it's like a spectrum. You can be moving in that direction even if you're not clean and pure or whatever.
It's a lot to take on board, isn't it, when you turned up for a martial arts class and
I know, yeah.
Now I've got to confront my inner demons before I can move around.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying on the wall up there from Vladimir that you don't, in a Systema class, you don't come to the class to learn spectacular moves or fancy kicks. You come to work on your own pride, ego, frustrations, self-pity, anger, and some of the slow work allows you to see that more, and like a good teacher will be able to say, okay, you moved out of tension there, or out of fear or aggression, and to just notice that and breathe it out and clean it, and then get clean movement again. Clean movement is a word that's used a lot.
That's a nice phrase, that, because it's emotionally clean, isn't it? And as you, all the breathing out to release things, feels like a cleansing type movement, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What's different between what you're saying and a lot of other martial arts is I think you actually really mean it. You can't be aggressive. Like, no, that's aggression. Don't do that. This is muscle. Don't use muscle. Use relaxation. And it's a different level of the idea that is essentially in all martial arts, is that you're becoming a better person, or stuff
I think
like that.
It's one of the things that quite caught me quickly in Systema was that the Systema had an actual method of teaching those things that I'd heard a lot about. No, you need to relax more. I'd heard a bit about breathing in some of them, as in you need to breathe, but not really giving you pointers on how to make sure that happens. Just breathe. So like Systema had some really useful and workable methodology that showed you how to relax, and was able to point out and let you see it quite clearly where you're tense, where you're holding your breath, where that tension's locking you, restricting you, tiring you out too quick. and showing you how to correct those things, and then, as we said earlier, how to take that into your everyday stuff rather than just limit your training to that couple of hours on the mat.
Yeah, that was definitely the sense I got, was that I could do all these things you're talking about, or try and train them. It doesn't have to be in a martial art. I could do this while I'm making a cup of tea. I can do this when I'm just moving objects around the house. I kind of want to do it while I'm making a cup of tea now. Like, I'll look at that as an opportunity to practice moving and relaxing and not muscling it.
Yeah.
Like even picking up the kettle, something simple like that.
Yeah.
How do you pick up the kettle? Are you just sort of grabbing it carelessly and wrenching it around, or are you just relaxing?
And how much more effort, how much more effort are you using than is needed for that job, and where are you tense?
Yeah, me, lower back mainly. Everyone's got their little bits, haven't they?
Yeah, they have.
It's very individual. I mean, because teaching Systema like you're doing, it seems to be a very individual process to me. So, how is that encouraged in Systema?
Yeah, and not kind of. Yeah, it's a good question. So, because Systema's not a technique-based or kind of structure-based, like a structured martial art, it's based on principles. So, for anyone listening that is kind of new to Systema or the idea of it, it's based on 4 principles: breathing, movement, relaxation, and posture or structure. And the idea is that you kind of have got an awareness of those 4 things, whatever you're doing, whether you're moving on the ground, standing, walking, grappling, wrestling, dodging a knife attack, in a mass attack, or any of the scenarios in between. So the idea is that if you're working those 4 principles, then there'll be more of a natural response emotionally and physically coming from your body. And then if that is a natural response, it'll be you, kind of not someone else's form or someone else's shape or someone else's idea. That, because really, though, those things aren't Systema's or Michael's or Vladimir's. They're kind of your birthright, really. And if you watch a toddler, as soon as they can stand, they stand pretty straight. The breathing will be pretty good, and their movements will be natural, not contrived or anything like that. So then, if it's you coming through, then that your experience and your capability and your personality will come through in it. So in that way, it's you, because you're not conformed to doing someone else's shapes, whether that's your teachers or someone from 3,000 years ago that kind of wrote them down in a book.
So there's no syllabus that all Systema schools must follow this method. It's what the instructor feels like, almost. Doing.
Yeah, so it was hard for me, really hard, because I came from a martial arts wise, a kind of form technique based martial arts.
Because you've done Aikido for 25 years or something.
That's it, yeah. And but also my army training, you lesson plan, and you kind of you've got the key points you want to hit through the lesson, and the remind and revise. And I was never completely that structured, but obviously that had coloured the way that I teach and instruct, and still a little bit. I've got those methods of instruction in how I do things. But Michael said, and Vladimir say, you shouldn't really have an idea of what you're going to teach when you turn up. Just go and you feel the need of the people there, and you give them what they need in that session, at that time, at that moment. And the two can sit together a little bit, so you can have an idea of a plan and then be free and flexible to move around that and off it as dictated by the group there. But I felt quite exposed, and but it's right. But it depends what you're trying to get across, of course. It depends what your aim is in training the people that are there. I guess it depends what the aim of the thing is, but for sure I can see the wisdom in that idea that whatever ideas you've got coming into the class, it needs to be coloured by who's in it.
Yeah. So talking about the class, like, what sort of people do you typically find come to Systema classes? Is there a type, or is it a complete cross spectrum of everyone around?
Good question. So again, you can that can be a little bit down to the teacher who's teaching it. Kind of what they, because you can take Systema and be just kind of combative about it, and so some classes don't have anything like the amount of movement and breath work in them as kind of maybe I showed here today. Some of them might be a lot of internal work where there's not that much big shapes, physically movement going on, but a lot of internal awareness. And some of them might be kind of more of a balance of, and that's where I try and sit mine, a balance of healthy movement, healthy breathing, cleaning your emotions out, and then carrying that into whatever flavour of the combat side of Systema that we're doing. So I've got all sorts. I've got kids classes, family classes on a Saturday morning with 3-year-olds, right the way up to, in some of the health classes, I've got some 60, 70, 80-year-olds.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, which is great. And then men, women, so it's quite a mix, really. I get quite a few people that have done a lot of martial arts but are a bit broken, in their bodies and things, and it kind of heals them while still doing that thing. There's still some grappling, there's still some striking, but maybe not the intensity that if you went to a BJJ or an MMA club or a boxing club, you kind of, the intensity's up there, and you that risk of injury is higher. So I get quite a few of those. Yeah, I'd say my average age is kind of more, apart from the family class, more kind of 30s, 40s, kind of than 20s, 30s. So 40s, 50s rather than 20s, 30s, I would say.
Yeah, slightly more mature people.
Yeah, that kind of see what it has to, or have felt the need in themselves of what it has to offer. So, in terms of the way it makes you feel at the end of the class, decompressed, relaxed, stress has been hit or moved or breathed or shifted out, and you kind of feel better at the end. And then, but they still get that fun of the martial arts that they've always loved, or just a very different approach to kind of health. So some of my classes are just health classes or solo classes where
because you've got
variety.
Like a timetable, haven't you, on your website? So it's like a health class from this time to this time, and then a more combat. Yeah, but they normally follow on. So I imagine people come for the first one to sort of hang on for the.
Yeah. Lots of time people come for that, and then they kind of stay for the other one, or come for the combat one, and kind of do the health movement one as well.
Yeah, because it's all the same stuff, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just a different flavour of the same stuff.
Yeah, you different. What's the word? Utilisation of it in combat. So you kind of the same principles run through all of it, and then you can use it for self-defense in combat, or bit of fun, or even other sports. So I've done some stuff with sports teams as well, to when they scientifically look at how changes make small incremental improvements, and but when you're playing in small percentages, they kind of make the difference. So just breathing a little bit better for an hour and a half, it can make a massive difference to what you got left in the tank in the last 10 minutes, sort of thing.
Yeah, and talking about breathing, it was really noticeable how I forgot about my breathing as soon as I had to think about something else. And then you're kind of like, keep breathing. I'm like, oh, I've stopped breathing. Yeah, you just don't notice these subtle little things, do you?
Yeah.
Which I thought that was fascinating. But talking about breathing, I mean, breathing's such a big part of Systema. I wonder how they got into this idea of breathing and how fundamental it was and connected it to martial arts. I mean, how do those two things get put together? And why do you think those two things got put together?
So Michael talked about this a little bit. I can't remember whether he told me it or whether I read it or heard it, but he talked about, in the early days of martial arts, when the warriors guarded the churches, temples, that kind of thing, and they would have to go off and, rightly or wrongly, do some very difficult things, emotionally difficult things too, like seeing with PTSD basically, but seeing your friends get killed, maimed, mutilated, or you have to do the same thing to defend yourself or in the name of something else. And then apparently the priests gave them the breathing tools to clean themselves afterwards, so that they could go and to heal themselves.
Yeah.
So they'd be able to go and do the same thing the next day. And the army today is interested in the same thing. They need a soldier not to be good once, but to be able to go out time and time and time again.
Yeah.
And do the job. And so Michael said that's where that understanding of how to clean yourself with your breath came.
So connection between religion and warriorship.
Yeah, and I'm sure in the East that would have been the same with the monks and the...
Well, the myth of the Shaolin monks is always a sort of connection between religion and martial arts, isn't it?
Yeah, and there would have been, I guess in those times, very little separation of those things. It was just part of your life. The two things, or everything together.
Separating things into different boxes is a very modern Western way to think about the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty convinced that a lot of the world doesn't even see it like that.
No.
Or didn't see it like that.
Yeah.
before industrial revolutions and, you know, modern life came along and told us what everything had, how everything had to be categorized. I'm sure back in the day it was all just part of everything, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's, the martial arts in Systema sits a little bit like that. Like, you know, people think, you know, Systema, Russian martial arts, but actually it's a part of a bigger thing, you know. The approach to life and the approach to thinking and the approach to movement, the approach to your wellness, health, kind of mindset, that kind of thing. It sits in a bit of a bigger thing. That said, it's the bit that defines it. It's the bit that gives Systema its efficacy, that understanding that, okay, so you can sit there and you can breathe calmly and smoothly, you can bring your heart rate down. Can you do it when someone's coming after you? Can you do it when someone's on top of you? Can you do it if someone's coming after you with a knife, or if there's three people? Can you do it under that, a bit more pressure? And that, I think, lets you know then a bit more whether it's yours or whether you've only got it under certain conditions.
I do think the student needs to have a level of self-awareness to get this.
Or they need to start developing it.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, you're just telling them, okay, you need to breathe.
Yeah, so maybe you don't have to tell them the whole story to start with. You just go, breathe.
Yeah. And little by little, they'll start, and like, typically they come back after the session and say, blimey, I never realised how much I hold my breath in daily life. And they'll just notice those things, and then they'll start to notice their own tension, like where they're holding tension in their body, and they become more aware of that, and then slowly they start to see what causes the breath holding, what causes the tension in the body, and generally it's overthinking or emotional stuff that makes you kind of tighten and tense. But a full circle on the bit about the monks and the warriors. Vladimir, I don't know when the last time he went, but once a year he goes to a place called Mount Athos in Greece.
Okay.
So it's a place of there's only monks on it, and it's like there's some monasteries, and you go there for some of the stuff they do. Like he said that one time they just stood for about 8 hours, and there were prayers being chanted and stuff. He says it's a very powerful place.
Yeah.
But when he went in there, he was walking down the dining hall, and one of the monks jumped up and said, "Are you Vladimir Vasiliev?" And he was like, "Yeah, I am." And he like dived on him to kind of put him in a neck lock, and the lad just kind of escaped and said, "Look, I can't hit you, father." But they sat down, and he was saying, "I've seen your stuff on YouTube," because obviously he had a life before he came into that.
All right.
And he said, "I've seen your stuff on YouTube, and you know, will you teach us some stuff about the breathing?" And it's interesting, they'd forgotten those breath practices.
Yeah.
And Vladimir, so they gave them to them in the first place, and like full circle, Vladimir kind of gave those.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember you recommended, back when we were more regularly in contact, you recommended me that book about the Spartans, the Greek...
Gates of Fire.
Gates of Fire. Yeah, great book.
Yeah.
And there's there's a big section of that about breathing, and how the soldiers use breathing to release fear and stuff. And they had a whole system of like touching points on the face, on the jaw, because the jaw sort of locked in when you were afraid, and they were releasing tension, and that was really interesting, and it kind of reminded me a lot of the sort of religious practices to do with breathing and letting go of things,
and singing. And they say, you know, that there's a feeling you get by singing as part of a choir. I'm not a singer, but they say that it's hard to touch that feeling of the coming together, and how that sense of almost, I don't know, transcendence, whatever, that you feel that when you sing as part of a choir or just a group of people, I guess.
Yeah.
So they say the people that do it say it just takes you to another place.
It does. I mean, even listening to a choir sing, you can when they're physically there. You know, it's different to watching it on TV, but you can really get a sense of the sort of emotion of things, can't you?
Yeah.
Even if you're not. I mean, I can't sing for toffee.
No.
So
I've always said to myself, I'm gonna get a professional singer to teach me how to sing a couple of Christmas carols, because I'd love to be one of those people that can stand in church and
me too.
Not show off, but sing and not be afraid to sing with a little bit of. It's interesting what you said about the jaw, and the seminar Vlad just taught in London, and he was making a point of how the lower part of the face is linked to the lower part of the body, and like when someone kind of tenses up the legs, the jaw tenses as well, and it's that's why when someone gets fixed rigid, they can't even shout. You know, it kind of the two are linked, and as soon as you ambulate the legs, you free up the jaw.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you had that recent seminar with Vlad in London, didn't you? And that was one that was presumably delayed because of lockdown.
Yeah. And
it finally happened again. So how did that go?
Finally, yeah, good. So the numbers were about the same as they always were.
Yeah.
We normally, or the last couple of times, I've done it in Wiltshire, which is in Shropshire, the National Sports Centre.
Right.
And that's a pretty central place in the UK, but not great. Well, I mean, you've got Birmingham, but not as good for people coming from Europe or the rest of the world. So
yeah.
Pre-COVID, we said, you know, why don't we try it in London and see if that you know makes it easier for people to get to. But it's hard to tell because we had COVID in the middle, and then the whole Russian thing. So, you know,
the whole Russian thing.
Yeah. So who knows how it would have, whether it would have, you know, brought in better numbers. But it was good. It was a success. There was I think about 160, 70 people. So yeah, it was good. It's great.
Wow, that's quite big numbers. It's quite good. So what did he teach you mainly over the? There's 2 days, wasn't it?
2 days, yeah. So the theme of the seminar was disarm and control.
Right.
So it was mainly kind of knife and short stick, and a bit similar to what we did. So, you know, trying to teach some concepts of, you know, freedom of response, freedom of movement, and cleanness of movement with different drills, and then gradually ramping those up into, you know, more.
I'm laughing because it like you say, it's all the same stuff. It's the same. It's the same 4 principles.
Yeah.
Like just in different applications.
Yeah, absolutely that. Yeah. And so you're looking at the same things from as many different angles as you can to try and make them yours, so that whatever happens, whatever the situation is, whether it's just a stressful bit of time you're going through, or whether it's a confrontation, or, you know, whatever it might be, that you've got some tools that you can reliably use to help you perform a bit better in that situation.
Yeah. So, I mean, talking about looking at through different lenses, like knife is one of the sort of lenses that Systema uses a lot, and its approach to knife work is very different to other martial arts. So how does that develop?
So one of the things is you look at both sides. So the attacker's working just as much as the defender is working. So it's not like you're waiting for your go. You know, you're just feeding stuff in and waiting for your go. So the attacker needs to make sure they're kind of cleaning their movements, they're breathing with it, they're not accumulating. One of the nice phrases that, not just in training, but as you go through life, you know, trying to accumulate relaxation rather than tension and fatigue. So it won't just start from the knife in the hand and you come in with a stab. Like, so quite often the knife will be on the body somewhere, and it goes right from the draw into the attack. And then kind of, so one of the things, I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're asking, but so you're looking to see the decision to draw the knife. So like the moment of the knife coming towards you there's been quite a few stages before that.
A lot of steps leading up to it.
Yeah, the decision, the positioning, the preparation in the body, the act of drawing, and then the act of moving towards. And in Systema you work to try and hide as much of that as you can in natural movement, and that way you learn to be a bit cleaner in your movement yourself, but also you learn what to look for as the defender too. So you know, you work both ways. And then it's funny, we were doing some knife work the other day, and we just made the point, you know, that we were grappling, and then you had a knife on you, and at any time you could pull the knife, and the other person had to first of all disengage at that moment, so move from being locked into a grappling situation to disengage fast as soon as the situation changed. And then we did it where you had to draw your own knife at the same moment as they drew their knife, so that, you know, you evened it up, and then deal with how to kind of manage it to move. But it's based on the same things, you know, light feet, heavy hands, so that you maintain mobility, and that, you know, if there's a knife situation, what you ideally don't want too much of is hard, rigid shapes that can get caught. That there's a real fluidity to the movement and a mobility, so that, you know, you've ideally got options to escape at any moment, or to control, restrain, disarm, hit.
Yeah. I mean, once knives get involved, I was talking to Matthew Kruger. He thought there was a lack in martial arts of the morality of when you use them. There's a lot of, here's what you do, like, here, you know, these are all the techniques and and the how you deal with this, how this situation, but he felt that quite often martial arts lacked the kind of like when you use them. Like, is it drunk person, is it a violent attacker, is it just a rowdy uncle at a wedding? There's that sort of, there's graduations and layers. How would you teach that in Systema?
So one of the ideal principles is that you stay, like I said, you don't have to become some berserker for Systema to be effective. You don't have to rely on maximal aggression and just going all out for 30 seconds to finish the fight, or however many seconds it lasts. That you can maintain a calmness and an emotional cleanness and do enough what you need to do, but no more is the ideal that you strive for. That you're aware of what you're doing as you're doing it, and you're not just kind of being a berserker. So there's that in terms of the morality, that you defend yourself or someone that you're defending enough, but no more. And so it's like if we're doing knife work, you're not teaching knife fighting. You're not teaching people to be assassins or anything like that. Even though it's come from the army, and even though the army would teach those things. So and what I say when I'm teaching people how to draw a knife smoothly, effectively, just the same as a soldier learns how to put a magazine on, take it off, put it in the pouch, and not have to look at it. Be able to clean a stoppage and stuff. You want those immediate action drills to be precise and smooth and reliable under pressure of sweat, mud, blood, high stress. So and especially the fine motor control stuff under high stress. So I'm not teaching people to be knife fighters, but how to deliver more of a real awareness of what those movements might look like if someone was coming for you, so that it'd be easy to defend against. But also, I don't think there's many people that come to me to train because they go out and use this regularly. It's just another way. It's a different form of stress and another way to learn how to move smoothly, softly, cleanly, and not in tension.
I guess it's just there's a lot of media perception of things with knives being dangerous and bad. And if I went home and told my mum, look, I've just been learning how to garrote someone with a knife, I don't think she'd be very impressed. No. Whereas I said, I've been learning to relax and move. And I think she'd be, that's really interesting.
But we use a knife.
But we use a knife.
We use knife attacks.
But equally, you use a knife to carve up your chicken on a Sunday, don't you? It's like, it's not like we don't use knives. Everyone uses knives.
Everyone uses, and there was a time when nearly everyone would have carried a knife.
Yeah, because it was a practical. You needed one to do stuff in everyday life, didn't you?
Yeah. Nice. Or as your trade or whatever, and I bet you people were more polite then. Manners, one of the better forms of self-defense. Good manners, and
Well, there's no internet then as well, which that makes a difference, doesn't it?
So there's a question. So how do you think, or do you think any of the stuff that you did this morning you could bring into play in your jiu-jitsu?
Oh, I was thinking about that, training? Like in the back of my head as I was doing it. I don't know, because I had this when from doing Tai Chi, started jiu-jitsu. Everyone was like, oh, how does Tai Chi relate to jiu-jitsu? What can you bring into this? And I just don't know. There's no easy answer to that question. I think you are what you do, essentially. So if you do a lot of Tai Chi, you kind of, it's in you, right? And it comes out under pressure. So under pressure, what you've kind of absorbed, I think, just comes out. So it's almost like it's too hard to keep those things, posture, breathing, movement, and the other one that I've forgotten. What's the other one? Relaxation. To focus on those things, I think I'd have to, while doing jiu-jitsu at the same time. It's a tall order.
It is.
I think it's more like you need to focus on those things in daily life a little bit, and then it would just seep in. I think it's not like it's not something you start doing, is it? Like a technique. It's more like it becomes you.
It's exactly like that. But in terms of my experience, if you kind of train it and then you apply it, then you kind of relax in, like Eastern profound kind of thing. It informs the kind of what you do. I remember Konstantin Komarov, one of the guys out of Russia, said it's like when he first start training, you plant some seeds inside, and then kind of they start to grow, and like your movements, your interactions become more informed by those ideas.
Yeah.
So I mean, but the one thing that probably I would say you could or would notice quite quick is you notice if you're holding your breath during certain bits and just breathe out, and then just that one thing.
In fact, that's probably the thing I'd start with. I'd probably just, like you say, it's all directly applicable to everything you do. So jiu-jitsu is just another one of those things you do, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it's particularly more applicable than it is to me getting in the car to drive back. They're all the same.
Yeah, same idea, I think.
They're all the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah, Michael, I remember saying about, I think it was to do with someone was doing what should be a natural, easy movement, but kind of jumping into it and making it quite stancy, and it kind of had the idea that, when you cut a slice of bread and butter it, you don't do dramatic kind of sharp movements. You just
I don't kung fu my bread, do I?
And it's quite funny, the kind of the visual. He's a very funny guy, and Vlad is actually, but the imagery around telling that little story anecdote was very good, but very apt too, that if you can do something kind of just very normally, then do it that way.
Yeah,
just do what it takes, kind of thing.
Exactly, don't draw attention to it.
Yeah.
So what's next for Systema here in Wiltshire?
I got a seminar coming up in November called Natural Movement, which is taking this idea of natural response, natural movement, and then gradually enlarge on the complexity and stuff of those ideas for a long weekend. Then I've got I normally do like a breathwork, movement work seminar in January, and then I've got a jungle expedition next October.
Oh, I was going to talk to you about these jungle expeditions. So you've started going off the jungle and living like a wild man for a week, haven't you?
Don't know about wild man. It's a bit of a cross between that and how a soldier approaches living in the jungle.
Right.
So, but they're quite similar. I mean, and wild man is kind of a native, I guess. But the idea of and it's quite, well, like we said, you can apply the system wherever you go. But I had one guy that's been training with me for about 7 years that came to both Borneo and Guatemala, and he said, he kind of got the idea of breathing and moving softly and that sort of thing. But he said he never really understood it until we went to the jungle, and you're carrying fairly heavy load up some fairly steep hills, and
so you're under pressure,
humid conditions, and your breath is under pressure, step by step, and how if you make each breath a little bit better, that makes a big difference at the end of a day of that. Yeah, so we've got that in October. So
this is where's the next one to?
India.
India.
So it's and India's a big place, but it's in the Arunachal Pradesh, which is the northeast corner of India.
Right
up where it borders China, Mongolia. It's in there, kind of the foothills of the eastern Himalayas, and it's largely unexplored. It's kind of a part of the jungle that kind of there's no maps there. It's only locals ever go in there, and they don't go in there that deep or far. So
you're taking a group of people from Britain?
Yeah, all around the world actually.
All around the world?
People from all around the world, yeah.
How many in total?
So I'm taking 20, ideally 24.
24?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then how long do they spend? And it's a trek through the jungle, right?
Moving each day to a different campsite each night.
So how many days?
So there'll be 7 days.
7 days of continual sort of moving through the jungle, largely unexplored.
Yeah, you set up your camp each night, so everything you need is on your back. So you've got your sleeping system, which is a hammock and a tarp. Yeah. All your food for 7 days you carry with you.
Talk about getting back to basics.
It really is.
Yeah. Your whole life is carried on your back.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
And you've got to have the skills, to be able to set it up, make it, rain proof. And
do you do a bit of teaching those skills before?
Yeah. So there's one or two meetups generally, plus there's some videos I've put together and stuff. And it's not actually that complicated. The complex bit is being on top of your personal admin. Because things catch up with you quite quick out there if you're careless. If you're careless, cut a few corners. Yeah. It doesn't take long in those sort of environments to catch up. For example, one of the guys that came on the Borneo one, didn't want to get out of his hammock at night for a pee, so he peed in an empty bottle and then just poured it out of the side of his hammock.
Right.
And then, of course, that attracted a lot of insects, the ammonia, and when he got out of bed in the morning, because it's still just, you can't quite see everything clearly, so it's just kind of breaking at dawn, and put his feet down and suddenly got bit by some fire ants. About 3 or 4 bites all at once.
Oh no.
And kind of then, that set him back about 20-30 minutes recovering from that, which meant he didn't have, he took a shortcut thinking, I'm not that hungry, because you're not hungry really, but you realise food is fuel, they're not enjoyment.
And if you haven't got the fuel, then you run out.
By kind of mid-afternoon. And so to get on time with packing his kit down and being ready to move off, he kind of skipped, he didn't tell me, but he skipped his dinner at lunch, breakfast, and then by about 4 p.m, he just collapsed.
Wow.
So it catches up, and he had a lunch, but that missed meal kind of caught up.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that would be the same for everybody, but
it could be, like those are the things that can happen if you're not.
Yeah, but it's the most, for me, it's the most magical environment. The variety of sights, sounds, smells.
So there'd be no artificial lighting anywhere, would there? You can see all the stars. I'm taking it,
yeah.
Which is in itself an amazing thing if you've never seen how many there are.
And to know that the air you breathe is completely pure, uncontaminated,
Yeah.
And the water you're drinking.
I guess you can hear animals too in the jungles.
Yeah, you were surprised. People think, you'll see everything. But obviously,
they don't
20 blokes walking through, they can see you, but you can't see them.
Yeah.
But almost every inch of the jungle is occupied by something. So there's plenty of stuff around, and you hear it at night.
Yeah.
Like there's that moment of about a minute or so when it goes from, because it's obviously quite close to the equator, from dusk till dawn.
Yeah.
India will be a bit further north actually. So when the light goes, and it's like someone turns a dimmer switch, and then in that minute or so, just everything that can make a noise makes a noise in the jungle.
Really?
And, the monkeys are jumping up and down in the trees and screeching. And it's incredible. You think, my goodness, how can I ever sleep through that?
Yeah.
But it only lasts a short period, and then by night 2 or 3, you don't notice it.
Wow. I guess you've got the campfire going.
We don't generally have a big main campfire because it's not like everyone comes in a circle. I kind of, with the groups, I split them into 3 subgroups. With the big group, I split into 3 subgroups, and each group has a kind of a group leader for that particular segment or phase or day, and I'll give each group an area. So it's not so much like a big circle or a corral of people.
Yeah.
It's kind of people are a bit more dispersed than that. But it's amazing because there's no other. You can very realistically just take a step off the track or just walk 5-10 meters out of where your thing is and think maybe no one's ever stood here before.
Yeah,
I'm looking at things that maybe no guys have ever seen before.
I'd be thinking, if I fell asleep here, this would be no one would ever see me again because they go on without me, and I'd be lost in the jungle.
So the interesting thing is I put in a lot of the mechanisms that the army has when they move in to prevent things like that happening. Someone walking off for a pee, tripping, rolling down.
So there's like a name call.
There's a buddy system, so you check where your buddy is. If you're going off for a pee, you tell
someone,
I'm just going down there for a pee. I'll be 2 minutes and I'll be back. I'm just going over the brow of that hill. So all those little mechanisms that you take for granted, I kind of implement, and the passage of messages, hand signals, and that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Last man in. So and people love learning that because that's much older than an army. That's a timeless scouting skills really from native tribes. That the army's absorbed those lessons. And
so
skills.
you kind of, I know you had your army background, but I think you kind of got into bushcraft a bit first, didn't you? And
after the army.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it's evolved into jungle craft.
Yeah. So still bushcraft here really, but and it's kind of just organically morphed. So like I did, one of the things that attracted me to Systema first was the practicing of it in different environments, fields, forests with trees around, uneven slopes, rocky areas, and then one of my first big intros to it was to go on the Vladimir's summer camp, which he holds in the forests in the north of Toronto by a big lake. So you do work in the water too.
Yeah,
and,
I've seen pictures of you punching people in water.
Yeah, And I thought, this is brilliant, because it drew together quite a few bits of my background and interests, and I've always loved getting out in nature and the trees and stuff. And and I'd done a few of those things in Aikido, but done them as Aikido kind of patrols, camps.
Yeah.
So I did it with the Systema flavour in it, and it lent itself very well. And then people would say, it'd be good to go somewhere a bit wilder. And so I did a few in Sweden, because in Sweden you can quite quickly go into a forested area, and you walk a couple of hours and there's no one around.
Right.
No man-made tracks or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I did those for like 3 or 4 years, and then someone said, would you go the extra step? Because I used to talk about the importance of different skills, and like if you're in the jungle, for example, then it's really important that you think about this, because in that environment. And I'd tell stories about it, and then a couple of them said, would you ever do the jungle? And so eventually I kind of looked into it and did it.
Wow.
And it was actually, well, firstly, I couldn't find anyone that did, because I thought, well, I'll just piggyback on someone else's thing that they already do, but bring the people along and see if I can manage them, And I couldn't find anyone that did this, and I was really surprised, because it, in my mind, it's not really a complex or a kind of too out there thing, but clearly it is.
I mean, to me, it sounds, and I guess I'm not involved in any bushcraft type things, but even if I was, I think this would be like a step up. But like you say, it also sounds like you just do the same things you would do in Sweden, but you just do them somewhere else.
Yeah, that's it. And things are a little bit upped, because of your things have to be a little bit more together and on point.
Yeah.
And Sweden, we would generally move to one area and stay there for the week, whereas in the jungle you're moving every day. So the skill of setup, takedown, finding your area, making sure you've got everything back in the right place, so that when you need it next, it's there. And
I guess there's greater risk as well, isn't there? If it's in, like, for one thing, it's in another country that's maybe doesn't have the same healthcare provision, but also you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Literally the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, by definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's lots more things that can catch you, bite you. Although the biggest risk, by far the biggest risk I have out there, is people's machetes. So whichever part of the world we go to, I get their version of a jungle knife, which is in Borneo it was a parang, in Guatemala it was a machete, in northern India it would be a dao, which is like a long Chinese, almost like a sword. So in a different part of India it might be a kukri, which is the Gurkha knife. But there is a dao. Be interesting to see it, actually. So and everyone brings that.
That's
home
what we
as a
called
memento.
the broadsword in Tai Chi is called a dao.
Oh, okay, right.
So it's the same name. It means knife, I think.
It's not, yeah. So it's
but it's like
quite long. It's
there's long, and it's kind of like it's like a willow leaf sort of
that's it.
shape. So it goes bigger in the middle, then down to a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, must be the same thing.
So by far the biggest danger is people swinging that around. So
catch themselves.
Catch themselves, or heaven forbid, someone else. So
yeah.
But it's a once in a lifetime experience for people, to experience that, and it's just awestruck, because I remember one of the guys that he'd been on the Sweden trips and UK trips, and we got to the jungle, and on day 3 I think it was a beautiful spot. It was by a river, and there was like a pool you could dive in and swim, and it's like a lovely temperature, and that's where you can walk around with you don't, but you can walk around with no clothes on, because it's so comfortable temperature. And he was just stood on the bank of this river looking down, and there were just some trees that went up, and he just couldn't see the top, and there were the birds flying, and there was some mist, and he said, wow, I just never imagined that it would be just as I imagined in my mind. Those images you have of Tarzan in the jungle. Yeah. And he said it's just, it's exactly like it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've got some local guides to help you?
Yeah. So wherever we go, we get some local guys to take us for safety, and initially it was that, like, for safety and sharing. But one of the biggest surprises for me when I did Borneo was how lovely an experience it was to, over the 7 days, because initially everyone's they're a bit standoffish of us, and we of them, and then how you start to literally around, they always have a campfire every night, you start to come together, and they invite people down, start sharing their knowledge and skills. And that really took me by surprise in Borneo. And when I was giving the final talk and the thank you and everything, and I kind of started to elucidate it as I was thinking it through, and I was a bit teary because I remember as a young boy, I'd always loved Tarzan and stuff like that, but I particularly loved the stuff like Dances with Wolves, where they'd been able to go and learn a little bit of how those cultures had done things, and absorb those lessons and see how they move through an environment, how they work in an environment, how they become part of an environment, and that came off these guides, and I'd kind of given up any part. Well, I went to Japan and lived in Japan, and it had always been like a strong pull in me to learn the old ways, or what they had to teach. And I always thought, those days are gone, that there's fewer and fewer places where you can go and do that. And it happened completely unexpectedly in that moment, and it was quite a moment for me.
Nice. Well, good luck with your next trip.
Thank you.
And well done with building a amazing Systema Academy in Wiltshire.
Thanks, Graham.
And thank you for teaching me this morning. I really enjoyed it.
It was a real pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, you taught me so much with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. Oh, maybe we'll get back to that at some point. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham. What a pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you for joining us. You can find out more about the Tai Chi Notebook podcast at www.thetaichinotebook.com. You can support us by becoming a patron. Head over to patreon.com/Tai Chi Notebook. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll tune in next time.